Welcome back to Next Gen Console Watch, our show following all the news and updates on the PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X, sometimes Nintendo. And today we've gathered the three families together. Joining us for the Xbox side of things is Ryan McCaffrey from Podcast Beyond. I'm sorry, Podcast Unlocked.
For a favor, yes. Hello, Damon.
From Podcast Beyond, we have Colin Stevens joining us today.
I will not be doing a Marlon Brando impersonation.
That was what you signed up for. We're gonna have to hear it. And then joining us from Nintendo Voice Chat, Seth Macy from the great state of Maine.
I knew it was you, Frito.
Good.
You broke my heart.
We're off to a good start here. It's our first episode of the new year, and we got everyone together because we're gonna make some bold predictions for what we should expect from PlayStation, Xbox, and Nintendo in the year 2023, which should be a pretty exciting year for video games in general. First half of the year, first 6 months are just stacked with games for all platforms. Back half of the year is a little bit more of a question mark at this point, but man, this could be one of the great ones. Could be a 2007, a 2011 tier year for games. So let's talk about what some of our predictions are for the year. Ryan, why don't we start with you? What's something you expect from the Xbox side of things this year?
Well, I'm going to get my not super happy, fun, positive prediction out of the way first. We've touched on this topic a little bit, but I'm going to make it official. I'll put a number on it just so people can hold me to something. I think Xbox Game Pass will go up in price at some point this year, probably in the second half of the year. And I'll say it's going to be $2 on the core Game Pass. So I think that'll go up to $11.99. And I think Ultimate goes up $3 to $17.99. Am I rooting for that? No. Do I want to see that? Certainly not. But that's just the reality. After Microsoft finally gets done spending $69 billion, whenever the Activision Blizzard deal does finally go through after all the regulator and legal hassle that it's currently wallowing its way through, I think it will go through. And I think the cost of Game Pass is just going to have to go up at some point. We saw their first party game prices reach parity with Sony and some of the major third-party publishers, by going up to $70 for the first-party games if you're buying them. And Game Pass is just going to have to go up at least a little bit to follow suit. And I think it'll happen in the back half of the year.
Yeah, I could see that happening, especially after, if the Microsoft or the Activision Blizzard acquisition goes through, then they can add games to it. So they've increased the value, and that helps to justify the increase in price. $18 a month. I don't think it's still like not a bad value. It will sting just a little bit because in terms of all of the subscription services, it's on the higher end, I think, for what people are paying for subscription services. Colin, Seth, any chance for your respective platforms you would see an increase in price for their subscription services?
For PlayStation, they just did the 3-tier model mid-year last year, so I think since it's so recent, I don't expect them to increase it anytime soon.
Seth?
Yeah, for the Nintendo Switch Online, I don't see them adding any more to the price unless they add like another tier with Game Boy Advance games, in which case everyone will lose their minds and they can just throw their money at Nintendo.
That's what people like to do with Nintendo, just throw their money at them. Yes, piggybacking along with Ryan's prediction, I think by the end of this year, I think everyone will be on board with the $70 price tag. Most of the publishers are. There's still a few holdouts, like Capcom. Street Fighter 6 in June is still a $60 game, but I think by the end of the year, everyone will see parity, raising the rising tide raises all boats. We'll get to $70, I think. Okay, Ryan, what's another prediction you had?
Oh, we're going right back. All right. Yeah. I think Hellblade 2 is going to be the headliner for the Xbox this fall. We've talked a ton about the first half of the year and all the games that we're still expecting that were shown off in the summer showcase last June that we're expecting by this June. Redfall, Starfield, Forza Motorsport, Last Case of Benedict Fox, Minecraft, the Minecraft game I'm blanking on the name of right now, Legends.
I think it's Legends, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, at least it came to me too late, but I got there. So there's a lot we're expecting in the first half. Will some of that slip? Inevitably, probably. But the question remains, what is the second half of the year going to look like? It's probably going to involve some games that weren't in that Xbox showcase last year. And I do think Hellblade 2 makes the most sense. We've seen it a couple of times. It was the very first Xbox Series X game officially announced, and it is a, I say this in a complimentary way, it is a Sony style game, a narrative third person action adventure game. And I think it is the kind of game that could do very, very well in a fall spotlight atop a first party's lineup. Now, I don't think that'll be the only one, though. They're going to need more than one big game this fall, one big first party game. So I think Forza Motorsport has a chance. That's one I think could slip. And I say that I'm not reporting anything. I say that only in the sense that we just haven't seen much of it. For a game that's supposedly coming out in the first half of this year, we just haven't seen much. And the press hasn't been invited to see it or play it yet, which is always, that's a checkpoint in along the marketing timeline that we haven't reached. So I think Forza has always, every single Horizon or Motorsport game has always shipped in the fall. And that's not to say that the next one wouldn't ship outside of that window, but history suggests that the fall is a good time for Forza. So I think that one could slip to the fall. And I think S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2, which we just got an awesome new exclusive gameplay trailer on IGN for over the holiday break. I think it published on the 29th of December. That did a couple million views on our YouTube channel. It just reminded everybody, oh yeah, S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2 is still a thing. The development team, sadly mourning the loss of a colleague who was confirmed to be killed in action in the Ukraine's defense of its country against Russia. So, they are going through a lot of real world stuff as a team, but work on the game continues. And that new trailer that we got just says 2023. So I think that could be a big fall first-person shooter for Xbox. And if I'm right about most or all of that, you'd have a lot of genres. You'd have a really nice lineup. You'd have a first-person shooter. You'd have a third-person narrative action-adventure game, and you'd have a racing game as well. So you'd have a lot out there. And so that's what I think the fall could very well look like for Xbox.
Okay, speaking of big games for the back half of the year, Colin, PlayStation is it's looking a little bit quiet for PlayStation this year. Of course, they're launching PSVR 2 in February, and we've got Marvel's Spider-Man 2 coming, which I would anticipate would be sort of like a fall game. Any other predictions for what you think Sony might have in store this year?
I think that Sony is going to go all in on The Last of Us this year, and I think a big piece of that is The Last of Us multiplayer game. Obviously, it still doesn't have a title, but most recently, this morning, as of recording, they revealed a new piece of concept art for it and suggested that it is pretty far along and that they're very excited for what it's going to bring, especially as far as story is concerned, which is interesting because usually multiplayer games aren't quite as centered on story. But then, obviously, at the beginning of this year, in just over a week, actually, The Last of Us TV show is going to premiere on HBO, and I have really high hopes for that. I think it's going to be a really big critical success, and HBO is marketing the heck out of it. I've got friends who don't play games who are excited to watch this just because it's the next big HBO show. Mm-hmm. And then even on top of that, we've gotten a lot of new interviews with Neil Druckmann, the co-creator of The Last of Us, because the show's about to come out. And in an interview with The Hollywood Reporter, he didn't outright say that there will be a part 3, but he did say, I think there's more story to tell in a sort of, winking manner. And I don't think that it's impossible for it to be announced by year's end, Last of Us Part 3. I know it's a little bit of a stretch, but they announced Part 2 pretty far ahead of the release of Part 2. And I think this is sort of the year that they want to strike while the iron's hot. So if there's a Part 3 in development, I would not be surprised if it's announced this year.
Okay, and then what's your prediction for what's Part 3 all about?
Oh, a redemption arc for Ellie. I think that's what it's primed for. She ended Part 2 on a very dark, very desolate note. And if I had to put a writer's cap on, I'd like to see her be able to fully redeem herself, willingly sacrifice herself for humanity like she wanted to do in the first game, but that was taken away from her. I think that would be a really satisfying conclusion to the series.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. Okay, Seth, in terms of games, Nintendo has a big first half of the year. Nintendo has IGN's most anticipated game of the year, as recently voted, the sequel to Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom. This month they've got Fire Emblem, and in March they have a new Kirby game. What do you think What do you think post Tears of the Kingdom Nintendo looks like?
Oh boy, that is a really tough one because Tears of the Kingdom, as I already predicted, is going to be the IGN Game of the Year for 2023. Check back, and we'll see if that prediction is correct. I have this weird, strange sort of premonition that sometime late in the summer, Nintendo is going to tell us that Metroid Prime 4 is ready, and that's going to be their holiday game. It's ready to release, and that's going to be their holiday surprise for us.
Spicy prediction. I like it.
It's a spicy prediction, completely not based on fact, but my God, it's been so long. They've got to have something by now they can spring on us. I also think the later half of this year, we're not going to see an announcement for new hardware, but we're going to see the first credible leaks of actual Nintendo next-gen hardware.
That's interesting. Don't forget about Pikmin 4.
Of course, Pikmin 4, it's ready to go, as is Wind Waker for Switch and the Metroid Prime trilogy. We'll get them all. And I can also say I'm pretty sure we're not going to see the Advanced Wars 1 and 2 reboot.
Really?
This year.
The whole year?
Yeah. The Amazon went ahead and updated the ship date to 2024. I think Nintendo's just too conservative, and they don't want to release their cartoon game. So, yeah,
insane what has happened to that game. So Ryan, just so we have you on record, you predict the acquisition of Activision Blizzard will go through this year.
Yeah, I think it's going to happen. Everything we're seeing so far, based on what the CMA over in Europe and the UK has said, and what Microsoft's case is, I think they've got a really good chance to get this through. I think it's going to happen.
Any other acquisitions you think Microsoft might be eyeing?
I do. I do think that's my final prediction for this show, for this episode. I do think that Microsoft will make one more acquisition. They're obviously in a holding pattern right now. They're trying to get this monolithic, industry shaking $69 billion acquisition of Activision Blizzard finalized. But I'm sure in the meantime, they've been taking a look at other companies that they might want to, bring into the fold. And I do think that they're not done. And one studio jumped out at me that I think could be a really good fit at Microsoft. This new Microsoft culture of not imposing their culture and just letting a studio do its thing and be itself. And for all I know, this studio wouldn't want to be acquired because they only regained their independence several years ago. But I'm taking a look at IO Interactive here. Hitman, they've really built it into its own sustainable ecosystem, basically. It just got kind of rebranded under all three of the sort of recent Hitman games under one roof, World of Assassination. And don't forget, they're working on a James Bond 007 game.
Right.
So, if Microsoft picks up the phone and the terms are right and everybody wants to make a deal, that's a win for IO, getting the marketing muscle of a first-party trillion-dollar company. And it'd certainly be a win for Microsoft to have a James Bond, game from a very talented developer coming out under their banner. So, again, am I basing this off of anything? No, it's just a fun prediction show. But
sure,
if Microsoft's got more acquisitions up their sleeve, and I really do think they do, I don't think Activision Blizzard will be the end of their spending spree. I really think IO could be, if that studio is willing and interested in being owned by a larger corporation again, I think that there could be a really good fit there.
Yeah, previously it was owned by Square Enix, right?
Yeah.
Before going independent again. Colin, on the subject of acquisitions, any predictions you have for companies that Sony might be looking to acquire?
Yeah, speaking of Square Enix, these rumors have been swirling for what feels like years. But I have a feeling that Sony could acquire Square Enix this year. And my reasoning partially comes down to there are 3 planned Square exclusives coming to PS5 this year alone. Forspoken very soon, Final Fantasy 16 in the summer, and then potentially Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth, which is the second of the remake trilogy games, though it'll almost definitely come out next year. And it's just like, Sony's already spending so much money on these exclusives. Just put a ring on it, their relationship has been so close for years, since the PlayStation 1, really. And most acquisitions PlayStation has made has been of studios that it very closely collaborated with. I do think that the current sort of rockiness of the Microsoft Activision Blizzard deal could maybe complicate things or slow things down. I don't think Sony wants to be seen acquiring a massive multi-billion-dollar company at the same time that it's constantly saying that it can't survive if Microsoft manages to acquire Activision Blizzard. But I agree. I do think that's going to go through. And I think after that's through, I think is a potential time that PlayStation could acquire Square Enix. And it would also be their biggest acquisition ever, to my understanding. The market value on Square Enix is $5.6 billion. And their current biggest acquisition was for Bungie for $3.7 billion, which I believe acquisitions are almost always above whatever the market value is. And so many suspect last year, Square, they sold off Crystal Dynamics and Eidos, and a lot of people think that that sort of points to them preparing themselves for a buyout. So, there's a lot of signs pointing towards this being a possibility. I don't necessarily think it's a surefire thing, but I think that relationship between the two companies has been there for so long that I think it makes a lot of sense as far as a really big acquisition.
I have a devil's advocate question for Colin on this.
Yeah.
And it's, why buy the cow when you're getting the milk for free? Square's already not interested in putting its games or being paid enough to not put its games on Xbox. Why spend $6 billion when you're already getting those games exclusive to your platform?
I'd argue they're probably not getting those for free. I'd have to assume
they're paying for them.
that
but not $6 billion. It's cheaper than $6
That's
billion.
very true. But then they would have total control over the Final Fantasy IP.
That
which
is true.
Very lucrative, especially with Final Fantasy 14 online. And then any sort of subsequent games. Obviously, they've done 2 Final Fantasy MMOs. So, who's to say down the line they wouldn't make a Final Fantasy 18 is the next MMO, let's say. I'm sure that they would love to sort of get that sort of revenue, just like Microsoft would love to get the revenue from World of Warcraft.
Okay, as you probably know, E3 is returning this year, so I want to hear from each of you what you think the likelihood of your platform's participation. Ryan, I think in recent years, Xbox has been the most involved with E3. They're still putting on their big stage show. Would you expect them to return to that forum this year?
Absolutely. Phil Spencer has very publicly said that the company supports E3 and wants to be a part of E3. So I would put the odds of between Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo, the highest odds are definitely Microsoft showing up. And, that they've stuck to June even when E3 didn't. So it certainly makes a lot of sense. Even with some rumors floating around about a late January, early February Microsoft Xbox event, I still think, it's a pretty much a lock that we will get Microsoft doing a press conference at E3.
And Seth, Nintendo has continued to participate, but they switched from their live presentation to a Nintendo Direct style. What would you expect for them this year?
100%. I expect they'll have a really cool presence on the floor. And I think they'll do what they always do. They'll show their Direct. Everyone will be losing their minds. And then they'll go to like a 3-hour Treehouse sort of live stream. And then they'll drop some other world-shattering news in like an offhand comment during the live stream. But I fully expect Nintendo will be there, and they'll be bringing just like the joy and magic that is Nintendo. And knock on wood, I hope I almost run into Mr. Miyamoto again. Like literally, I almost ran into him. It was awesome.
Seth, it'll be interesting to see what their Direct consists of, because their
Zelda will be
mega
out.
game, Zelda, will have just dropped like 2 or 3 weeks prior to that.
Yeah.
I mean, if their Direct is just like, hey, isn't Zelda great? I'll be there and I'll be excited about it, because yes, it will be. We'll all agree. No, that's when they'll announce Metroid Prime 4 is the Christmas game. So
I would love to see Metroid Prime
you're
4, but it's not, it doesn't throw up the numbers that, Mario or the other franchises do.
I think there's a very real possibility that we're going to get a Mario this year.
That's
the
what
Mario
I hope.
movie
Just like
is going to.
I know Ryan's there too. The follow-up to Odyssey. That's
I'm at the point. I'm at the point though where I want it to be a day one launch game for the next Switch, for Super Switch. I'm done with the current Switch hardware. I want to see Mario on a much more powerful machine. So that's hopefully both of those things.
Well, if
the
that's
new
the
machine
case,
and
go
Mario
to
will come
theaters
soon.
on April 7th and you'll see the most high-resolution Mario you've
I
ever
will
seen.
be there. I will be there on opening night. I
Oh,
can't wait.
absolutely.
I do
Yeah.
want a game that looks like that movie.
Yeah.
And then finally, Colin, Sony has not participated in E3s as of late. What do you think will happen this year?
This is slightly wishful thinking, but I do think there's a chance that PlayStation could return to E3. Live E3 presentations have been on hiatus for 3 years because of the pandemic. And Sony only actually missed one in-person E3 prior to that, and that was 2019. At the time, former Sony CEO Sean Layden said that like one of the biggest reasons for them missing that show was they only had a few previously announced games to show that year, so it just seemed a little redundant for them to be there anyway. And I think this year, I think PlayStation actually has quite a bit of it up its sleeve to announce, to show gameplay of. And since that last E3 that they showed up to, Herman Hulst has become the head of PlayStation Studios. And I think that industry folks really know just how much hype E3 brings to the table. And I have a feeling that they might come back. And part of why I feel that way is Reed Pop, which puts on PAX, New York Comic Con, the Star Wars Celebration. They're handling E3 this year. And I think that there's a real chance that they could convince Sony to return.
I hope you're right. Those were some of the most exciting times I've had IGN covering the industry is those 2 days, the Sunday and Monday of Microsoft, Bethesda, and then Sony closing things out on Monday evening. I hope you're right about that. Okay, any final predictions to share before we move on?
I'm all predicted out, Damon. Let's do a poll.
Okay. Nothing else, Seth? Just want to make sure you got everything covered.
I mean, I will reiterate what I've said in the past, that I think the Mario movie will be the biggest animated movie of all time. There's no wait. Oh, actually, you know what? You just
wait. Isn't the Lion King? Is that, or is it Beauty?
The
and the
Lion
Beast?
King live action is considered the largest grossing
Live
animated
action.
movie of all time. Yeah, whatever. Mario is better. Like the original Lion King is very good. But I mean, I think we were talking about acquisitions. I don't see an acquisition in Nintendo's future, but perhaps a merger with Universal because they've got the Super Nintendo World opening up this year. I don't know. We'll see. A lot of money to be made there.
I have one anti-prediction. I do not think we're going to see any sort of pro consoles this year.
No.
Way too early.
Nope.
Only recently have people been able to actually buy a PS5 or a Series X easily on store shelves. And
next holiday, probably next fall for those.
Yeah, and even PlayStation's biggest, most recent game was also released on the PS4. So it's like they haven't caught up to how powerful these consoles are yet. So no, I don't think we're going to see that for a long time.
Agreed. Okay, we have the results of last year's poll. We asked who had the strongest year in 2022. Perhaps unsurprisingly, PlayStation won, whopping by a large margin, 72% of the votes went to PlayStation. But that was followed by Xbox and then Nintendo. Seth, Macy, does that surprise you, considering that Nintendo had many more exclusives than Xbox did last year?
I mean, it's an internet poll, and people get a little saucy on those, so I don't give it a lot of weight. I think Nintendo had a fine year. Was it a great year for Nintendo? No. 2023 will be Nintendo's best year ever. Thank you, Tears of the Kingdom. Ever.
Better than 2017, where we had Odyssey and Breath of the Wild.
Yeah.
Oh, dang, that's right.
If his Mario prediction comes true, we could have another
because we're going to get Mario and we're going to get Metroid Prime 4. So it would be
amazing.
Nintendo's best year ever.
Okay, and before we go, we have a poll for you to vote on for next episode. Which of our predictions do you think are most likely to come true? Will Microsoft have another acquisition in mind after the Activision Blizzard one closes? Will PlayStation return to E3? Will Metroid Prime 4 be re-revealed, and come out this year? Make sure to vote at IGN.com, and we'll share the results with you next episode. That's going to do it for this edition of Next Gen Console Watch. Thank you to Ryan, Colin, and Seth for joining me today. Thank you to Marianne for working behind the scenes to make this episode possible. My name is Damon. We'll be back next week, 6 a.m. Pacific, 9 a.m. Eastern, with more PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X, maybe Nintendo, maybe PC news. We'll see you then.